Hi there, welcome to Module 2, and I just wanted to really congratulate people for Module 1 and the responses that they put forth in the discussion forum. Your responses were so much better than mine and read closely with and against the readings that we have. What I wanted to present for this module, having read the articles by Macbeth and Paulini, Waite, McNeil, and Lunn, is about some of the spaces of the teaching and learning that we might consider to be queered or that need queering and why. And one of the big things that struck me is the ideas of vulnerability and of desire. And what does desire and erotic knowledge and a lust for something, whether that's knowledge or anything else, empower us to do? And so I'm going to take you on a little walk through my own world, which is mathematics and science teaching, and I'll focus on mathematics just to present a short vignette of some of the ways that you might think about querying a subject, especially one as normalized as mathematics. And so I open with this quotation by Audre Lorde. Our erotic knowledge empowers us, becomes a lens through which we scrutinize all aspects of our existence, forcing us to evaluate those aspects honestly in terms of their relative meaning within our lives. And this is a grave responsibility, projected from within each of us, not to settle for the convenient, the shoddy, the conventionally expected, nor the merely safe. And I think that's some of the work we're doing here in this class. This quotation, written by Audre Lorde, is one of the reasons I recently came out as gay. Well, recently, I mean within the last 10 years, in my teaching career and in my life. And as a secondary mathematics teacher and now a teacher of bachelor education students and graduate students, I've lived a mathematical and personal life full of limits, categorical identifications, and exclusions. So to scrutinize all aspects of my existence as I hid and passed as straight for over 30 years brought me to a place where the queerness of my own body and my own Desi body, like as an East Indian, Canadian, and Indo-Canadian, and the rigidity of mathematics that I teach and the ways that I was teaching it could no longer stand next to one another. So I've been plagued in recent years as to whether like uncertainty, endangerment, and the nebulousness of queerness has any place in mathematics teaching and learning. And yet, if I really claim to be inspired by Lorde's words, I need to confront this convenient, shoddy, and the conventionally expected in the field that I know best of all. So I've written a short paper with the assertion that the mathematics teaching and learning needs querying in order to understand the bodies, differences, and boundaries in the classroom and beyond, much like the piece that we read here about the prison and what it meant to have a certain body in a certain space and what it means to exceed those boundaries, to go beyond them, to do something like poetry, to teach someone else to read, and so forth. Britzman, just to return to Britzman's groundbreaking curriculum studies article, Is There a Queer Pedagogy or Stop Reading Straight, listed two pedagogical stakes for education. The first has to do with what the discourses of difference, choice, and visibility mean for pedagogy, and the second is to think through structures of disavowal within education, or the refusals, whether curricular, social, or pedagogical, to engage a traumatic perception that produces a subject of difference as disruption, as the outside of normalcy. It's this second concern that seems most pressing more than 20 years after Britzman penned the words, especially given the conspicuous lack of intersection between queer theory and mathematics education in the literature. As I enter the mathematics classroom, I'm struck by its pedagogical and real boundaries. There's the artificial social construct of the teacher and the student in a constrained space, seeking clean, elegant, verifiable solutions day in and day out. Dubs 2016 reminds us that the mathematics classroom is held to be culture-free or unbiased, despite literature indicating the oppressive nature of content and pedagogy. Indeed, mathematics education's researchers have begun to peel back the hegemonic masculine discourses that influence students' and teachers' mathematical identities. I'm left with the question of whether it's even possible to queer mathematics learning and teaching without reducing it to a turn that inserts LGBTQ content in an artificial manner. One instance that comes to mind is what Rands calls the, quote, add queers and stir varieties, such as children finding the areas of pink rainbow flags or pink triangles and rainbow flags in elementary school geometry. While the word queer has a contested history, previously linked to shame and homophobia, as we discussed in Module 1, it's presently been reclaimed by the LGBTQ2 community. Despite the ongoing risk that the wider public sees queer as a falsely unifying category for all non-heterosexual identities, at its heart, queer resists assimilation precisely by its lack of containment. Its affront to being reduced to an easily subsumed group that can be neatly packaged and acknowledged as part of a host of diversities in schools, even as it has become what Britzman calls, quote, the afterthoughts of inclusion or the special event. And we see that a lot in schools. Like, we'll have a special day for Pride or whatever, but queer folks are around all the time. I'm quite dull. I pay my mortgage and I go through my life. But are we the afterthoughts of inclusion or the special event? Thus, it's the radical unknowability of queerness that poses the greatest threat to mathematizing. After all, how can a pedagogy based on a term shrouded in nebulousness and resistance fit neatly into the world of mathematics, whose calculations and equations demand clarity, quantification, and knowability? And you might find these questions also in your own pedagogical spaces and work. So I'm going to present a little bit of a case study in just a minute. Also, I want to ask, what benefits are there to upending norms in mathematics teaching and learning? What's the point? Why should we do this? One answer might be that to queer mathematics is to avoid the kind of reductionist paradigms that integrate LGBTQ2 content into mathematics curriculum as a form of best practices. I contend that it's highly problematic to integrate safe, reproducible models that become the go-to pedagogical methods for queering the mathematics classroom correctly. We saw that in week 1 with the idea of a house pedagogy. Is that the house pedagogy of queers now? But I think it's actually better if it's not quite reproducible. So to that end, instead of a template, I offer here a thought piece for reconceptualizing mathematics education as queer, by engaging in practices that risk pedagogical disaster. The result might be a more open, less oppressive environment for all students, regardless of their emergent sexualities. As a mathematical starting point, I turn to a well-explicated case study used in teacher education posed by Bowler and Humphreys called the border problem. Now, the border problem is a simple 10 by 10 grid with the perimeter squares colored in. So students are asked, usually in the elementary classroom, how they might guess the number of squares in the border without counting them. So you can't give them a piece of paper or anything. You just put it up there and say, how many do you think there are in the border? Nice and quick. Looking at how to integrate the problem into an intermediate mathematics class in the BEd program at UA Ottawa, I came across a video being used by Bowler in a summer camp for 7th graders. She begins by asking how students feel when they think about algebra. One student replies, 5x equals 25. Bowler acknowledges this, but then asks about the children's feelings. I was struck by her insistence upon feelings and, contrastingly, the student's inability to break from conventional modes of thinking, rehearsing answers like X and Y. Bowler then presents students with the border problem, and they take turns making various guesses fairly quickly. Of course, only one of several answers is correct, but this isn't the point. By the end of the multi-day lesson, where students' incorrect answers, trials, and communications are allowed to hang in the air unattended, students eventually find ways to generalize their ideas into multiple equivalent algebraic methods that could then help them find the border for a grid of any size. I felt a strong desire to jump into the first minutes of this video and explain all of the ways to solve the question. I'm a teacher, after all, in the classroom. But then as I watched the children think out loud, this swell inside me urging to run to the safety of reproducible, safe, and normal answers surprisingly abated. The point here is not that inquiry-based mathematics is new. Rather, watching those kids introduce me to a different kind of erotics than that frenzied movement rushing me towards, and dare I say it, bodily release and then relief when that final totalizing solution appears before me on the page. Variables crisply written and all the correct steps neatly and properly shown. And you might find that in an area of your own expertise. What is that sort of erotics of expertise? That feeling of arrival, calmness, and certainty is attractive to many in mathematics. However, in these videos, I was struck by desire enacted as joyous conflict and disruption, bodies moving about the room, and the sharing of ideas and solutions that weren't reproducible, normal, or even correct. This is risky business, and yet teachers didn't intervene. Inspired by the scenes in the border problem videos, this little thought piece offers some possibilities for queering mathematics as an erotics of disrupted mathematical learning. Naturally ambivalent about locating, much less defining, a queer turn in mathematics education, I extend an invitation to understand queerness as a kind of enlivening bodily experience. I invite all the kinds of corporeal feelings that emerge as we engage with numbers and embrace fear and exhilaration and learning without a comfortable mathematical scaffold on which to stand. No doubt there's answers at the end of equations, but to open the heterosexual closet, to use Davis and Samara, a disruptive mathematics which denies the teachable moment not only becomes a form of queer curriculum theorizing, but also enriches the life of mathematics as we do it, and mathematics does us, as its numbers and processes penetrate the mind and inhabit our bodies separately and together. To use Samara and Davis here, they encourage what are called heterotopic events. And these are curriculum events in which things not usually associated with one another are juxtaposed, allowing language to be more elastic, more able to collect new interpretations and announce new possibilities. No doubt, challenging heteronormative boundaries in mathematics, beginning with a question with the very title, The Border Problem, is more than just metaphorical. If mathematics might be less straight, or like worked on in ways that refuse productive pedagogies and quickly accessible, clean, normal solutions, then disrupting its output both challenges the shoddy, conventional, and safe, to return to Lord's words, in mathematical thinking, while refusing to locate queer as a singular identity or readily accessible analytic category in curriculum theorizing. By outlining an erotics of mathematics learning, moments which are unchoreographed and convey unexpected emotion, movement, expression, and language, I hope to elucidate how uncertainty, which is traditionally disavowed in mathematics thinking in our field as teachers as well, might enable us to rethink the challenges of mathematics, sexuality, and learning all at the same time. Finally, rather than link the concept of success as the natural or heterosexual offspring of knowing the right answer in the right way, I suggest the opposite, like a queer futurity emergent from being present with others and sometimes disorienting ways, and a co-spatiality amongst teachers and students that fosters new mathematical thinking. So this was my response to the articles that we read this week. In terms of how I could queer the space and query the space of teaching and learning that I inhabit on a daily basis as I return to my own classroom tomorrow morning in the high school setting. What does it mean to leave wrong answers hanging in the air? What does it mean to not have that frenzied desire to correct it, but instead to let other desires emerge that might be queer to the space of mathematics? Wrongness, dialogue, talking about the quiz when you hand it out, letting students talk about the quiz for 2 minutes before they start working on it. How are these things queering the spaces of teaching and learning, and how do they reflect our own vulnerabilities and come up against our own desires within the fields that we teach or in which we learn and in some ways rely on to feel comfortable? And so I think some ways opening up other, like our minds and our hearts and a co-spatiality, as I argue there, in terms of letting other people's vulnerabilities and desires emerge, which I'm hoping to do in this course through our own dialogues, challenges my own paradigm of thinking and even my own bounded sense of what my queerness means or what queering my own curriculum means. So I hope this has been a little bit helpful and is a bit of a thought piece around what it might mean to queer a certain curriculum and provokes you to think about this week's bookend response on the discussion board for yourself as well.